Hey everyone, JC here. First of all, I do apologize. I do look a bit rough. I had a cold recently, and I think it was a cold and not the other thing starting with C. I could have gone to the hospital and get a test, but the thing is, right now we're having a very huge outbreak here, and so if you do go to the hospital to get a test, if you don't have COVID, you might come out of it having COVID because you caught it from someone there, right? So yeah, you have to be careful. Anyway, I feel a bit better. Should be fine in a few days. I wanted to make this video because, as you probably noticed, my page is getting a lot of attention because of some of the memes I posted, etc. And I just wanted to go through some of them today and just identify the flaws of the people's arguments. Okay, so the first one we're going to look at is actually Zach. He says, you know, I'm asking kind of rational questions, but these questions are for irrational beliefs. And so, uh, in order for believers to answer my questions, they really have to move the goalposts. And as we all know, that's a logical fallacy, right? So you don't really want to do that. And this one person here says, Rudy Sanchez, he says, I've read the Bible cover to cover at least 3 times. Many things in it I just cannot accept. Well, that's good. At least you're honest about that part. Do I feel that I'm wrong? Not in the least. I think you have a rational thinking brain, and God made so. So you can use reason and not just accept everything you are told. There are also many good things in there. Are a guide for all to follow. I disagree with that because, first of all, if you say that the brain was made by God, you have to demonstrate that's the fact. You can't, I mean, okay, you're free to make assertions all you want, but at the end of the day, what I'm more interested in is the truth. Or, I mean, I know we can't claim absolute truth, but we can have a very high degree of certainty in any topic, right? So, yeah, if you say that, then you have to prove God. The other thing I really disagree here is that the person says he read the Bible 3 times. There are He recognizes there are problems with the Bible, sometimes even probably very serious problems with the Bible, and yet he still follows the book. Look, I got the Bible right here. I bought it because, when I was doing the show, I had to read some stuff, right? Had to read some quotes from the Bible. But the thing is, if you just read Genesis, right? Genesis 1, well, first of all, it gets the order of creation wrong because there are plants and vegetables before there is the sun, let's say. And then it appeals to magic. It says, oh, let the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the heavens, etc., etc. So he created sea creatures and flying creatures, etc., and he thought it was good. Be fruitful and multiply. Okay, and then he made other creatures. So all of that here, okay, this is an appeal to magic. Like, there is no demonstration, there is no proof of any of this whatsoever. So if you make again, you can make an appeal to magic if you want, but what I'm interested in, again, is the truth. And this person here is actually a very good example of somebody who says, okay, there are serious problems with the Bible, but I'm still going to go along and believe it, right? And I think this is because these people have not studied logical fallacies, they have not studied logic and reasoning. And in that case, I do recommend, for example, taking an online course. This one was from Duke University about logic and reasoning. I passed it with distinction. Very difficult course, by the way, very difficult indeed, for especially for an online course. But don't let that fool you. These online courses these days are sometimes very, very good. Anyway, once you go through the process of logic and reasoning, you look at logical fallacies, probably you're not going to say the things that Rudy is saying. Okay, and just one more, because I don't want to kind of overload people with this video too much. We're going to look at the comment from Tom Lisitra. I hope I get the names right. And, he says that faith in God are very different from religion. I actually kind of agree with that, because, yeah, you can have faith in something, like a God, without religion. But at the same time, I would also argue that it is, in fact, religions that put the idea of God into people's heads. Okay. So, yeah, you can't, I mean, it is possible, but I really kind of doubt it. Then he goes on and, he goes into personal experiences. This is, again, a very classic thing to go into. He basically says that, he sees the works of God every day. He answers my prayers, etc., etc. Okay, these always fall under, anecdotal evidence. I mean, yeah, some stuff might work for you and you attribute that to God, but really, that's like fitting Cinderella's shoe onto an elephant's foot. Um, you're really trying hard, very hard indeed, to fit that, to fit your narrative, right? So, when we talk about faith, right? Let's take an example. For example, you have a airplane pilot, okay? So when you board an airplane, so the religious person will say, "Oh, well, you have faith in the pilot, right? That he's gonna lift off and land safely, etc." And I say, "No, not at all. No, that's not true. That is not. That is a flawed way of thinking. The way it works is that you have a reasonable expectation based on evidence. So you'd hope at least that the company has checked his background. They have the pilot has undergone extensive training. He trained for different situations. For example, if the airplane stalls, he knows how to react based on his training, etc., etc., etc. So you go down through that list, and yes, it is still possible that maybe that day he had a bad day. Um, Maybe he just got divorced with his wife. There are pilots out there. There are cases where pilots, well, they're supposed to fly in pairs, and that's for security issues. But there are situations where a pilot ended up alone, and he had all these issues that accumulated, and he basically decided to commit suicide. There was one airplane a few years ago, I think. I believe it was a Malaysian airliner, but I'm not entirely sure. It just kind of disappeared, and we still haven't found it. But the main theory goes that, yeah, he probably committed suicide. There was another case before that, somewhere in Europe, I think in near the Alps somewhere. There was, I believe, a German airliner. Again, same thing. The pilot was feeling suicidal. He found a reason to, kick out his co-pilot, first officer, I should say. And then he locked the door and he crashed into the mountain on purpose, killing everybody on board. So unfortunately, yes, this happens. But you can't say I have faith in a pilot. You have a reasonable expectation based on the evidence. He also says an interesting point here. He says, had I not been exposed to Christianity, would my belief be the same? I can't answer that. I don't have that perspective. Well, my question to you is, and in fact, I asked him later in the comments, is why not? I mean, why is it so? Why are you so like entrenched in Christianity? Is that because you were, let's say, born in the States, and we have 70% of people in the States who identify as Christian? I mean, Christian has a lot of denominations. Let's not forget that as well. But okay, it still doesn't matter. 70% of the population is Christian. So, is that because you were born there? Because beliefs, a lot of time, beliefs are based on geography, like where you were born. Um, I'm sure if Tom was born in, let's say, the Middle East, he'd be a very staunch Muslim right now, right? If he was born in India, uh, a very devout, like Buddhist or Hindu or something like that. If he was born in Israel, then probably be a Jew, right? It has nothing to do with the truth of the argument. It has to do with your geographic location and what has been drilled into your head since you're a child. There's a great meme. I'll just throw it up here. If ever in doubt, you can just use this method. So prove your God doesn't exist. Number one, think of a God you don't believe in. For example, Zeus, right? Okay. Number two, determine which standards of proof that this God does not meet. Well, you can say a bunch of things here. There's very few texts. It's just kind of a ridiculous made up belief. I mean, this old man that throws like lightning bolts from the sky. Clearly, that's not the case. Okay, apply those standards of proof to your own God, and then number four, wonder why you didn't see it sooner. I totally agree with that. Totally agree with that. He finally says here that no matter what examples he will provide, we will still not believe him, right? Because again, anecdotal evidence is very poor evidence, really, if any at all. So on the topic of faith, right, and prayer, uh, that your prayers are answered. Well, I've been watching shows like The Atheist Experience, etc., etc., pretty much for well, since they began, really. So it's been over 15 years, and for 15 years, every week, theists have been calling in. Okay, sometimes it's atheists too, but mostly theists because that's what they want. Actually, more theists to call. And for 15 years, they have given their arguments for God, uh, provided some arguments for faith and prayer, etc., etc. And for 15 years, they have fallen flat on their asses every single time. This is not convincing, and maybe that's not your purpose. Maybe your purpose is not to convince anybody, and in that case, that's okay, I guess. Uh, but again, the prayer thing, you really have to kind of give examples because, oh, I couldn't find my keys, so I prayed hard, and there they are. There are my keys. Therefore, prayer works. But an even better example is if you have a football game, and I mean like American football, not what they call like soccer, let's say. Okay, so let's say you have Team A, Team B playing each other. On both sides, so both teams have very, very religious supporters. Okay, one set of supporters prays hard for Team A to win, while the other prays hard for Team B to win. Well, we know that in football, especially, let's say there's no possibility of a draw. Okay, so there's only a victory or a defeat. Very clear cut. Well, in that case, one of the team is going to win, right? And that's going to mean that prayer has worked 50% of the time. But why did God favor that team, though? Why is that team special? Why are those supporters special? The other supporters are just as devout and they just prayed as sincerely as the other team, but their team lost. What does that tell you about the nature of prayer? Well, some people would say that it works 50-50. Like half the time it works and half it doesn't. But I just say that even that is an appeal to something, which I can't think right now. But I would say, yeah, prayer really not demonstrable evidence whatsoever. Definitely, you can't. If you go to a court case and you say, well, I prayed for something and this happened, they will just throw you out. It's not serious, and that brings me to my conclusion here is that I find it very, very sad that adults. I mean, okay, I understand to a certain extent if kids strongly believe in something like this. Especially, children are like sponges when they're young. They absorb everything. And so if a kid grows up in a very religious household, chances are, they're going to really believe all that stuff without any evidence, just because, again, they accept it uncritically. They don't have yet the faculties to properly critically think about something. That comes a bit later in life, when you have a bit more knowledge and experience. So yeah, so I do understand that kind of scenario. But if you're an adult, though, like if you're in your 50s, 60s, 70s later, and you still believe in God and in Christianity, I just think there's something wrong there. Like there's some kind of disconnect. And in fact, yeah, we call it cognitive dissonance. That's what it is. So anyway, that's it for the video, because I don't want to make it too long. I hope I kind of addressed certain points a bit better, because you can type things out, but then it becomes this large novel that nobody reads anyway. Anyway, I after that particular conversation, I provided certain examples, because that person also says that, well, my beliefs are my beliefs. I'm free to believe what I want. And I posted an article which comes from the Atlantic, and you can. Okay, I will actually link it in the description, so go check it out. It's an article about how the U.S. lost its mind, and it goes into very great depth about this very idea that because people are able to think or believe anything they want, now we have chaos in the country, and that's to be expected. Unfortunately, that's what happens. So yeah, um, when you say that you're free to believe what you want, unfortunately I disagree with your statement, because there are people, parents for example, who believe in some absolutely insane stuff, and then because of those beliefs in those insane things, they go ahead and murder their children, or they kill their neighbor because he worked on a Sunday or something like that. I mean, it's not super common, but it does happen, and in my view, that means that this is not a good way forward. So yeah, the other thing I want to say is beliefs warrant evidence. You have to have evidence for your beliefs. If you believe something without evidence, for example, hey, I believe in God, but there's no evidence. There's nothing we can see, touch, smell, measure in like infrared or something like that, because our eyes are quite limited. We only see a certain spectrum. We have instruments though that can see infrared, X-ray, etc., etc. So you can use all those instruments, and if you still see nothing, but you still believe in something out there, your belief is not justified. So, and then what I want you to do is I want you to keep asking more and more questions. Look, it's okay to not know things. For example, let's use a black hole as an example. You look at the sky, let's say like long time ago, and you see this object, right? Well, we can't see it with the naked eye, because the nearest black hole is actually quite far away from here. Well, it's at the center of our galaxy, but it's too far to see. Anyway, it's there. Anyway, if you could see it, look at the sky, you see this hole there. What is that? Somebody thinks about it and says, "Ah, it's a black hole." Are you satisfied with this answer? You're just going to say, "Oh, okay, well, it's a black hole, then we're done. I can go home." No, you ask more questions. What is it? Well, it's basically like kind of a gigantic star that went supernova, and then it kind of collapsed on itself. Okay, why does it collapse on itself? Because mostly because of the force of gravity, because gravity has prevailed. and has contracted it. Okay. Um, so like, what happens at what's the event horizon? What happens at the event horizon? What is at the center of a black hole? Do black holes evaporate? They do, by the way. They emit Hawking radiation. You ask more and more questions, and it's okay to have even more questions after that. It's okay. But that's a process I encourage people to go through, and not just read this and say, "Oh, well, it's real because the Bible says so." No, no, not at all. Not Don't do that at all. By the way, just very quickly for the record, I do have another online course certificate from University of Rochester. This one was about modern astronomy. So yeah, I do like astronomy and space stuff. I'm a big space buff. Anyway, that's it for this video. I hope it's helpful. Uh, Definitely, keep seeking out the truth. And I know that again, we can't claim absolute truth, but we can have a fairly high degree of certainty in some field, right? So that's kind of the objective, I would say, for everybody, to acquire more knowledge, to ask more questions, and to get closer to the truth. But again, every belief that you have, every position that you might hold, it needs evidence. Don't just say, "Oh, well, I believe this," and there's no evidence whatsoever, but I just believe it. It's not good enough. All right, on that note, that's it. JC signing off, and stay safe, take care, and I'll see you back in the comments section. Bye bye.